the latest edition of Late to the Party for my newsletter, Astrolabe. Basically, the gist is I pull Astrolabe's readers online, and they tell me what I should take time to play. Usually for the first time. Sometimes I'll replay something I'm familiar with, or I've played a little bit of in the past. But I take an hour, 45 minutes over my lunch break. I play it. I talk about it. Give those first impressions, and then I write it up in the upcoming issue of my newsletter. And so today, thanks to my followers on Twitter, we are playing the classic Sega Genesis role-playing game Phantasy Star 4. I've never played it before. I'm a huge 16-bit Japanese RPG nerd, but my experience is all with the Super Nintendo. And so the Phantasy Star series is something that I have always meant to play. I didn't have access to it, and I've just never really made time for it going forward. One of the really interesting things about Phantasy Star, which maybe we'll talk about a little bit more later, is that the whole series tells sort of a continuous, or at least interlinked story. So it starts with Phantasy Star on the Sega Master System, which was an 8-bit console like the original Nintendo, and it carries forward through Phantasy Star 2, 3, and 4. 3 is a bit of an outlier for a lot of reasons that I'm not really that clear on. I think it's its own little story. It tells a multi-generational family story, and people seem hot and cold on it. But Phantasy Star 4 is kind of the culmination of the story that started in Phantasy Star and Phantasy Star 2. It takes sort of the best of the series, really distills it down into its kind of pure form, and is considered just one of the best RPGs of that 16-bit era, alongside Final Fantasy 6 and Chrono Trigger and all of the the heavy hitters. Phantasy Star 4 is right there with those ones. So I'm excited to take a look. I've probably played the first half hour of this game a couple of times and never really stuck with it. Part of the reason for that is I always feel like, because there's this overarching story, I should go back and play the first 3 games, but they're kind of hard to play. Phantasy Star is right in that early 8-bit JRPG mold. Lots of just lots of jank. So I've never really gotten up the gumption to actually play through the earlier games to get up to the point where I reached Phantasy Star 4. But on the Nintendo Switch, they just released a few months ago a Sega Ages version of Phantasy Star, which introduces a ton of quality of life features, reduces grinding, whole bunch of cool stuff. So I feel like that's the opportunity to get involved with the series, get on board, see what's going on. But today we're going to check out the classic Phantasy Star 4 and go from there. So thanks for joining me. Let's get going. So right off the bat, one of the things that really stands out about the Phantasy Star series, which you're going to see quickly, is that where a lot of the popular Japanese RPGs of that time were fantasy-based, maybe pulling in sci-fi elements or steampunk elements or what have you, Phantasy Star is just full-on sci-fi. You travel around to different planets, and this intro alone kind of shows you the scope that it has above and beyond other games at the time. And the soundtrack, this intro song, is just it's a great sci-fi song. Kind of brings in a bit of that cyberpunky funk, which is a lot of fun. So here we go. So I play as the main character named Chaz, joined the Hunters Guild, so now I'm on my first mission. No longer trainee, full-fledged partner. So we're going to go try to, whatever comes ahead of us, we're going to tackle. I think one of the first things that really stands out to me when I'm considering Phantasy Star, especially knowing its status as a classic Japanese RPG, is it's not really that visually impressive, especially when you hold it up against other well-known classic RPGs from that era. Final Fantasy VI, Chrono Trigger, Seiken Densetsu 3, Star Ocean. All of those were like, they were pushing some really incredible hand-drawn graphics. Whereas Phantasy Star, like, I'm still seeing something that is clearly modeled on like the NES style RPG. We have like really kind of rigid tile based graphics. We have like, tall sprites, but they're not very detailed. They don't have a lot of character. We have no real like opportunity for expression or animation or personality to come through those sprites. However, Phantasy Star goes above and beyond in a lot of ways in how it kind of portrays its story and uses some artistic style to bring in those elements in a way that's unique compared to the other classic Japanese RPGs of the time. And we're going to see those pretty soon. Right now we're going to Matavia Academy in the town of Piata, which is the town of learning. So we're going to head on over there. This is part of our first mission. So let's get going. And I'm not controlling right now, so this is all just like cinematics, just story, getting the game going. And I'm just gonna head on to Twitter, try to get some people on over. Watch. Okay, here we go. So this is a world map. Love it. Super classics world map style from that era. World maps, I feel like, are something that have really kind of gone missing from Japanese RPGs in more recent years. But they've made a comeback here and there, and I always like it when we get to mess around in the world map. I'm still not controlling the game. This is still just automatically like pulling me on to the next town. But here we see our first kind of take on Phantasy Star 4's like visual style. So what it lacks in sort of, bespoke, hand-drawn, really nice detailed sprite work and environment work, it makes up for in these really gorgeous like illustrations. And this is going to pop up all throughout the story in many different ways. And it gives us, this portal into the world that shows us great perspective, both on like the setting, but also on, as you'll see coming up, dialogue. And it brings in this almost like comic book style illustrative storytelling method that is really unique in the genre, and I'm pretty excited to see more of that. And so here we go. We see our first kind of opportunity to see that. So we have the classic character portraits in the bottom left corner, but we also have these two illustrated panels, which are kind of showing us and giving us this impression of what this gray-haired guy is like. You can see he's very stern. We're getting a lot of expression from the two main characters. Which is great. It's unique. It really brings forward sort of the emotion and detail of the world in a way that, Final Fantasy VI does it differently. It does it through a lot of animation. It does it through like hand-drawn, like unique settings that step outside sort of the tile-based look. So there's lots of ways to do it. And I think that one of the great things about the 16-bit era is there were still a lot of limitations, technical limitations that required creativity to get around. And so we saw a lot of different ways that the creators and the designers of the games were working within those technical limitations, trying to grow the scope of Japanese RPGs. And so it ranges like all across a whole scope of kind of visual styles. And this is one of the most unique, one of the most interesting, I think. Okay, so Alice and Chaz, that's who I'm controlling. We have to go down into a basement and defeat some monsters, which, you can step outside of the fantasy realm and into sci-fi, but you're still heading down into basements and fighting little monsters at the beginning of your RPG. So let's get going. The principle seems to be hiding something. This is an instance. We got another panel here showing him, like when he's been questioned by my party, he's getting a little defensive, and you can really see that in that expressive comic book panel. So he wants me to get down there, exterminate the monsters, and he's being quite passive aggressive in the fact that he's hired us for this, or he's hired the Hunters Guild, and we just better do what he says. So here we go. So yeah, he's hiding something. Chaz thinks he might be afraid of the monsters, but Alice understands there's more going on there. Okay. So let's head on down into the basement here. So we're going to get our first taste coming up of the battle system in the game. If I can find my way to the basement. Okay, here we go. All right. Okay, so we're going to take this guy, Han, with us. He's an assistant at the academy. Again, like we got this, cute little static portrait, which is fairly typical for the time, but they introduced just more visual narrative into the game. And I feel like that's a very like Sega thing. When I think of like this style of illustration for storytelling purposes, I think of a lot of the Sega CD Japanese RPGs as well that brought it in, and it's just interesting how kind of divergent the Nintendo path for Japanese RPGs and the Genesis path were over time, and I really like that. I really like seeing the difference and the way that each company sort of took on its own look and feel for the genre. So nobody's been allowed to go down in the basement. Somebody else went missing down there, so they're trying to get information from the principal. He seems to know more of what's going on than he's letting on, and then now there's monsters down there, and Han thinks it's there's a connection between the two incidences of the person going missing and the monsters appearing, and Alice is all over that theory. Okay, so Han wants to go down there. He thinks it's dangerous, so he's just been waiting for us hunters to come and help him out. And now we're bartering over how much he has to pay us to come. Okay. So he's paying up, got $100 and another party member. And so one thing now I'm going to go, before we get down into the battles, I'm just going to check out some of the menu system. I'm always a sucker for systems and just like the UI for how they kind of show us everything in the game. And we've got fairly typical stuff. We've got item. I don't have any items. There's a tech tree, so I can check my different team members. Alice doesn't have any. Chaz has one called Res. No explanation for what it does. And as far as I'm aware, that's sort of a quirk of the Phantasy Star, the early Phantasy Star games, is that all the yeah, exactly. Like what we're seeing right now, 000, is that there's like these character limits, and Phantasy Star is like pretty opaque in terms of how they name their spells, their techniques, and there's no explanations. A lot of like res probably means resurrect, but who knows? We'll have to test it out. I know on the Sega Ages version of Phantasy Star 1 on the Switch, as I was talking about earlier, one of the quality of life things that they added to the game is you can access a little manual that has the name of all the spells and techniques and tells you exactly what they do, which is really handy. So Han has res as well. Maybe it's not resurrect, maybe it's some sort of like a cure spell or something. So we have text. We also have skills. Alice cannot use special skills. Han cannot. Chaz cannot. So I don't know what the difference is between text and skills. We've got equipment. Again, we're seeing a lot of like character limits here, right? So we have leather helm, leather cloth, but those are obviously really stripped down in terms of the writing. State. So this is just status. This is pretty cool, pretty classic. I love the big portraits are cool, and you can see here that Alice is level 7. She's quite a bit higher than Chaz, who's level 1. Han's also level 1. So right off the bat here, I like that this game, it's following a fairly typical structure for the party, but I really like that, like, the Gandalf type character is this, like, badass older hunter, but that's also a woman. Like, she's way stronger than Chaz, and it's nice back during this era to see kind of stronger women character take the lead. It's something that I really respect about Final Fantasy VI, and to see it in another kind of contemporaneous RPG is really nice. Okay, so we also have party talk, which is pretty cool. So I can, yeah, they've asked us to explore the basement, so I can check in with my party, and that's going to help me when I forget what to do and where I need to go. And it also adds like a nice layer of personality to the party. Party talk became a lot more popular in later Japanese RPGs, a little bit on the PlayStation. I'm thinking of like Grandia had like the dinner table setting, so you weren't talking like to your party whenever, but you were having these opportunities to just sort of like get to like optionally get to know the people in your party and see those conversations with them. So to see this in a 16-bit game is really nice, because it wasn't really around a lot during that era. It was like I'm thinking like PlayStation 2 is when I really feel like the party system or party chat really started to kind of come into play. Of course, if you've flipped on over to PC RPGs and you're looking at stuff like Baldur's Gate, there you're getting a lot of this kind of stuff. And so this feels like there might be some influence there, like bringing things in from the PC-based RPGs to kind of flesh out the story, flesh out the characters, which is pretty cool. As anyone who follows me on Twitter knows, I'm writing a book right now about the history of Japanese RPGs, and I haven't gotten to the Phantasy Star section. I'm really curious to start doing research into what the creators of Phantasy Star, like what their motivations were when they were working on the Master System version. I know a lot now about Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy, why Sakaguchi and Hori made those and what they wanted to bring over from PC RPGs. But I'm seeing stuff in Phantasy Star now that reminds me of other elements from PC RPGs that weren't necessarily brought over into those early Nintendo RPGs. All right, our first battle. We've got a really bopping battle song, which is great. I really like how different the music is in this game compared to other RPGs at the time. There's just like a really kind of like, sci-fi, techno-y, fast pace to the music, and that's cool to hear at that time. Like you're thinking of other games at the time during the 16-bit era, you're thinking of the big epic sort of sweeping scores from the Final Fantasy series, or Dragon Quest's orchestral music. This is totally different, which is a lot of fun. So I have command. It looks like this is turn-based, so I'm probably going to put in all my commands at once, and then the round will play out. I can also set up macros, which is really cool. So there's a preset macro, so if I choose this, everybody just attacks, and you can see I can set up to however many that is, 8 total macros, which is great. I love auto battle when it's included. I'm a big auto battle person. At Dragon Quest XI, I pretty much auto battled my way through all 120 hours. And this is an auto battle, but this is something that gives me kind of that extra layer of control over my party, because, as anyone knows, you get into these battles and you're doing the same thing over and over again. And so to be able to just like set up combat macros is like, feels really ahead of its time. And so I can see there, like, Alice seems to have like a boomerang attack that hits everybody, which is cool. I'm going to use my macro again, whereas Chaz is more of like a one-on-one direct damage kind of player. So super fast battles, which is maybe my number one pet peeve for Japanese RPGs. I just got finished playing through Chrono Cross, replay on the PlayStation. And I could use the fast forward function because it was New Game Plus. Thank goodness, because even with the fast forward function, the battles in that game are so slow. When I got back into playing retro Japanese RPGs again and like really investing in them again, probably 3 or 4 years ago, the first thing I was like really surprised about was I expected to go into the genre and just find slow battles all across the board, but I didn't. And especially in the 16-bit era, I got in and I was like, wow, these feel really snappy, really quick. You're in and out really quick. The battles themselves also happen really quickly. Turns are really fast, and it's only really during the PlayStation era when things started to slow down, and then really during the PlayStation 2 era when things slowed down quite a bit. And that was not just in battles, but also just in exploration and the way they built worlds and stuff like that. And so like Phantasy Star 4 here is like has these really super snappy battles. And that right now, like just playing through a battle when it's that fast, that'll bump a game right up my to playlist. Okay, yeah. So that's a nice 000 saying in Trails of Cold Steel 4, it has a turbo mode, and the ability to skip animations by pressing start, and that's something that I really appreciate, especially because the Cold Steel games are really long. Like you don't need to be watching through animations every battle in a long RPG. A lot of the time, like this is all just it's number crunching, right? It's an interface for number crunching and a bit of strategy and tactics. And when you're just kind of cruising through a dungeon, like there are points when you just want to get through those battles, do the inventory management or the resource management and just move on from there. And so it's nice to see like more contemporary games recognizing how people want to be able to move through battles and just get back to exploration. Okay, so I can go down again. All right, surprise attack. So I got while we're getting through this battle, actually, I picked up a new microphone. You can kind of see it right here. I was just using the little mic on my headphones before. So let me know how the sound feels. If it feels okay, the levels feel okay. If I'm loud enough, if I'm warm enough, if anything sounds off, just let me know. I hope it should sound better than the mic on my headphones. But I'm going to kind of continue to look into how to utilize just better production value for some of these streams. Next, I need like some nice lighting and a fancy game room like all the Twitch streamers. Okay, cool, awesome. All right, let's keep going here. So far, battles seem quite easy. Obviously, I've only been fighting these. Oh, level up. I've only been fighting these basic enemies, so who knows? I don't really know what the series' reputation is, or this game's reputation is in terms of difficulty. I find that most of the 16-bit RPGs aren't really all that hard, especially as I've gone back to them now as an adult. But that could also be because I've been playing a bunch of Square RPGs, which are generally easy to sort of cheese once you know how the systems work. So we'll see. So Chaz and Han just leveled up. I imagine that's going to kind of make these battles go by quite a bit quicker. Han seems quite weak compared to Chaz and Alice, but that kind of stands to reason. They're hunters from the Hunter Guild, and even though him and Han and Chaz are the same level, like Chaz is going to be more experienced. I'm curious to see if Han is like a permanent party member, or if he's somebody that just joins the party for a little bit and then leaves, and whether there's going to be more characters kind of jumping in and out of my party throughout the game. Okay, so this doesn't look good. I'm not sure this is what the school principal wanted me to find, but he did send me down here. Okay, I want to check one of these. Oh, what is this? Okay, this looks like a boss. Let's see what's going on here. All right, that sounds like boss music to me. Okay, so I have some more skills. Were those skills? text. So I couldn't see these from the main menu screen because they're combat only, I suppose. So let's try them out. So I have Saner, Shift, and Foy. Foy kind of sounds like maybe it's fire. Let's try that out. Okay. And now these I have. So this was a tech, I guess, and it looks like they're kind of limited use, but I'll give that a try, and I'll use Gelon with Han. Oh, Vision. Okay. See, like, I have no idea what any of that did, which is kind of bizarre. But let's see. Earth did a ton of damage. That seemed good. Vision. Okay. So Saner upped our agility. Okay. Earth didn't do anything. Okay. Dexterity is up. So it looks like some of these are kind of, upping my stats. I don't know how good that is in this game. Seems like early in the game I'd rather be doing, just doing damage or whatever, or increasing rather than agility and dexterity. I'd rather be increasing attack or defense. None of these enemies are doing all that much damage to me though, so I don't really feel like I'm in much trouble here. Alice's boomerang seems really strong because these little basic mobs have very little hit points, so she's able to just sort of melt through them in a couple of turns, which is really handy. So Chaz is getting a little low on life here. Next round I might try Res, which I think is a healing spell. We'll see how that goes. I'm really into like the behind, like over the shoulder first person battle system. It's reminiscent of Dragon Quest, but being able to see your party members like right there is pretty fun. Especially as they change, it just gives that like little bit of extra perspective to what's going on in battle. Okay, so Vortex was very strong. 60 damage was great. Yeah, Res is a heal spell. I like this battle theme. It's good, but it almost doesn't feel to me or sound to me quite as like big and epic as the main battle theme. It's a little more chill, which is interesting. Okay, so yeah, I mean for the first boss, a first boss is the first boss. They're never going to be that tough, but I'm finding challenge-wise the game's quite easy so far. All right, so Alice, like wasting no time, is already right on, right on Chaz about how he can improve, which I'm loving. Okay, you can't really hear the game audio. Can you hear it at all, 000, or is it just quiet? Because I do have the volume turned down quite a bit, so I can turn that up a bit. Is that any better? Okay, here, let me turn it up. There, something like that might be good. Is that okay? Great, good. Yeah, trying to find the balance between my vocals and the game sound is something that I can't figure out how to hear like the game volume out of my streaming app. I can just hear it coming from the emulator, so I was trying to find that balance. How does that sound? Sounds good. Okay, so Chaz, pretty stoked, destroyed the monster on his first hunter mission. Alice is, she's doing her thing. I really like Alice. She's, taking charge. She's she's pretty funny. Okay, so Han is coming down here, and he's, by proxy, he's the one that's going to be telling us a bit about what's going on, what the story is. The game wastes no time getting right to like a mystery, which is good. Again, like as I talk about like the speed at which I find 16-bit Japanese RPGs move, it's not just the battle speed. It's not just like zipping around like more condensed overworlds, but like the narratives just move faster. I pop Tales of Symphonia, or I pop a PlayStation 2 or a Wii RPG into my system, and like I'm playing through tutorials. I'm playing through an opening village where I'm having to collect this and that. The inciting incident, doesn't happen for half an hour, 45 minutes into the game. And it just feels slower. And I don't always mind that. I don't mind easing into a narrative. But sometimes, like when you want something super snappy, these older games really give that to you. And like we're half an hour into this stream, but like I feel like I could, if I were playing normally and not kind of talking through this, I'd probably have gotten to this point within 15 to 20 minutes, which is just, I think, just a really great pace. And I like how there's like multiple conflicts already. Like we have Chaz, who's sort of like eager and excited about being a hunter, conflicting with Alice, who's a little more grizzled, world weary, sort of like tamping down his enthusiasm, but then being thrown immediately into this conflict that is obviously a lot more complex than just the simple first mission for a hunter. So it balances like sort of like the main A plot, which is the monsters in the basement, with Chaz's conflict with Alice really nicely. And then Han comes along, and like Chaz was initially the kind of weak, inexperienced one, but even Chaz seems like more of a badass when you compare him to Han, who's like a scientist student guy. So I'm going to try to get out of this basement as quickly as I can so that we can keep going and find out what's happening next. So the dungeon was pretty short. There were areas that I didn't explore, though. I could go and look for some of the, there's probably more treasure chests and stuff like that. We'll kind of go check out what's over here. One thing I will say is that the encounter rate, at least in this dungeon, seems pretty high to me. We're getting into battles every few steps. Thank goodness they're fast, but at the same time, like, it does kind of interrupt the flow and exploration a little bit. Like, this is an instance where like there's a treasure chest down here, but to find it you have to have bypassed the stairs along the critical path. These are the stairs that led to the boss. But if I get down those stairs a few steps in and I'm like, oh hey, this looks like the way I'm supposed to go, because of a high encounter rate, I'm not necessarily going to want to backtrack to go check out if I can find more treasure chests earlier in the dungeon. And so that finding that balance between like encouraging exploration while also like inserting the battle system, the combat system in there is like it's a tricky balance. I kind of err on the side of a lower encounter rate, and one of the interesting things about I keep bringing it up, but Phantasy Star on the Switch, the new Sega Ages version, is what they did is they halved the encounter rate but doubled the experience you get from encounters. And that was an attempt to make the game a little more palatable nowadays. And I could see doing something like that for this game as well. It's just taking out some of the grinding, some of the battles, and just doubling the experience that you get from those battles. I think that could be a nice balance for a lot of older RPGs, frankly. Okay. You seem wrong. You seem upset. Yeah, no kidding, dude. Okay, we're able to defeat the monsters. Yes, but there's something I want to ask you. What? Is it just my imagination that I saw some strange things in the basement? Okay. This principal guy seems pretty intense, but look at that smug look on Alice's face. He's sweating, and she knows she's in control here because she has knowledge of what was going on down there. I don't get why this guy would hire a hunter's guild to go fight those monsters if he didn't want us to see the, vials of weird mutated creatures. Okay, sixth most dangerous thing in the world. She's got she's confident. I like that. I also feel like she probably won't be in my party for the whole game, which makes me sad. Okay, so Principal broke really easy. He's now telling us what's going on. There's a new breed of monster, an outbreak of new monsters. Been leading to a lot of work for the Hunters Guild. 3 months ago, Holt identified Birth Valley as the origin of the outbreak. He went to investigate. He discovered the remains of the ancient and advanced civilization. So I don't know if this directly ties into Phantasy Star or Phantasy Star 2 or 3, but one of the things about the series, as I was explaining earlier, is there's like a huge history that spans back to the very first game. And so as you're playing through Phantasy Star 4, as I understand it, there are a lot of nods back to Phantasy Star and Phantasy Star 2, that I probably won't notice, certainly won't notice, but that kind of really rewards players who have played through the game, through the series one game at a time. Okay, there's a man named Zio, who appeared before the principal. Zio is known to Alice as a fake magician. I'm going to guess Zio is probably our principal antagonist. He's, wearing big armor. He's red and black. He's looking like a guy who's probably not up to any good. And so this is a little flashback. It's showing us what Zio was saying to the principal of the Academy of Motavia. So Zio calls himself the Black Magician. Alice is a little skeptical about that. Okay. Okay, so Han wants to go to Birth Valley to help out the professor. Alice is giving him a little heads up. It's kind of cool. Sandworms, like, kind of throwing back to obviously one of the classic sci-fi series in Dune, being set on a sand planet like this. I'm assuming the other planets you visit probably have their own biomes, which is always fun. And there's always in that case opportunity to touch back to a lot of the different narrative influences on the game. Okay. I really like that Alice just keeps extorting Han, because she knows he needs her help. Okay, so we're going to Birth Valley next. One thing I want to point out with the graphics that I think is really cool is at the edge of the desk, you can see where I'm walking along right here, and then at the edge of the room, we have fake shadows. And also right here in the little window, there's also fake light. And that's a really kind of cute and clever technique that they've used to create this kind of sense of lighting, by just swapping and lightening and darkening the color palette for those tiles, which is really cool. It's super subtle, like they're not in your face about it, which I also really respect. But it gives a nice depth to the world, especially with this kind of more simple tile based look to the game. Where am I going? Okay. Does anyone have questions right now about about the game or anything else that they wanted me to check out, or anything they want me to touch on while I try to figure out how to get out of here? Okay, here we go. Oh, nice. Okay, so we're in town now. A parcel monsters. Okay, let's go get some sleep. Okay, so I have quite a bit of Meseta, which is the money. I have about 1,100, and it only costs 1,500 to sleep, which is kind of wild. I've always kind of gotten a kick out of the fact that you always have to pay these nominal fees at inns in Japanese RPGs. It never really amounts to much. It's never a strain on your finances within the game. But I guess it's just sort of tradition. I know there are some games that sort of scrapped that and just let you sleep at inns for free. which is fine, but it's always kind of, I've always found it funny when you have to pay 15 Meseta just to sleep. So you've got nice big environments, which is cool. You head on inside here, and it's fairly plain in the way that it's been laid out. But I like how they have these layered carpets, layered rugs, and it's a nice little area. And honestly, if anything, sort of feels a bit too spread out, and not as compact as it could be. One thing I like, actually, if I head back in here, I like how I'm inside the house, but instead of just having like a black border around the house, I can actually see outside the house, which is kind of cool. It keeps that sort of like scene in place intact for when I walk out, which is cool. Some students jumped into the fountain the other day. You should take a dip. Can I take a dip? What an impressive fountain. I guess not. Okay. So let's head out. I've got about 5 more minutes left. I'll try to find the Valley, or Birth Valley, or whatever it was called. I've really been enjoying Phantasy Star so far. Phantasy Star 4. This is the furthest I've ever made it. I've only ever kind of stepped foot into that little basement before, and then cut out. It seems like a fun game. I really like the science fiction narrative. I really like the way that it uses kind of unique visual elements during dialogue for key moments, introducing sort of some of the cinematic storytelling that we would see later in the genre, instead of just having static text boxes over top of the sprites in the overworld, trying to bring in like something that's a little more dynamic and interesting, which would obviously come to dominate the genre after Final Fantasy VII. But seeing it here a little early on is a lot of fun. It's cool. It really helps set it apart from other games of the time and of that era. I do not know where the valley is. I should have read the dialogue. What I'll do is I'll head back to town, and I'm sure one of the townsfolk will kind of give me a general sense of direction. Has anyone in chat played, or is anyone familiar with the Phantasy Star series more so than I am? I know one thing that's kind of kept Phantasy Star 4 in particular on my to play pile for a while is that I'm my understanding is that it's fairly short, like 25 hours, under 25 hours, which is always really nice. I feel like there was a real push towards longer, more bloated RPGs later on, starting with the PlayStation era, where it was all about how long the RPG is, rather than just telling a tight, compelling story. And I'll take a really tight 25-hour RPG any day of the week, over something that's really sprawling and takes a million years to beat. I mentioned I completed Dragon Quest XI earlier this year, and it was just ridiculously long. I don't know how to save. I haven't seen an option to save, which is strange. Maybe there's statues or something? But let's try to find out how to get to the valley. Your parents live in Mile, a village northeast of here. I haven't been getting my allowance. I wonder if they've forgotten me. Becoming a hunter. Oh, that sounds exciting. Okay, monsters aren't appearing in town anymore. That's good. Okay. Nobody's telling me something. I'm going to go northeast towards that town he was telling me about. So that's up this way. I'm going to wrap this up once I get to the next location, whether that's a valley, whether that's a town. I just want to thank everybody who stopped by today to chat and watch. I'm recording this as part of my newsletter that I put out semi-regularly. It's called Astrolabe. You can find it at Aidan, AIDAN, .substack. substack.com, aiden.substack.com. It's free to subscribe. I cover all sorts of gaming stuff with a retro focus, mostly Japanese RPGs. But I also cover science fiction and fantasy. I talk about writing. I talk about stuff going on and that I've been working on. This upcoming issue, which I'll write about Phantasy Star 4. I also have a big piece about fantasy author Terry Brooks and what he means to me personally, and how a few times throughout my life as a young writer, he changed my perspective on things, on storytelling, but also what it means and what it can mean to be, a generous, kind, successful author. So I'm really excited to share that. He just released his final book. Not his final book, sorry, the chronological conclusion to his long-running Shannara series. Last week, it's called The Last Druid by Terry Brooks, and I have a review on Tor.com that you can find if you just Google Tor.com, The Last Druid. So that's what I've been working on lately. Next issue of Astrolabe, number 7, it's coming up probably tomorrow, depending on how quickly I can write up my impressions of Phantasy Star 4. It's been a ton of fun to play. I'm really into this. This is the furthest I've ever made it. I really do need to get to the Phantasy Star series at some point, especially because I'm working on this book, Fight Magic Items, about the history of Japanese RPGs, and I feel like I need to have a better personal knowledge of what Phantasy Star brings to the table. So thanks for everybody who voted on this. I'm glad that it won. It's been really fun, and I can't wait to spend more time with it. I've got another poll for the next issue, number 8, coming, and it's going to be a really fun poll for anybody who's sort of into the modding community. So I've got some cool game choices coming up, and I'm excited to see what everybody chooses for me and what I get to play for the next issue as well. But thanks so much for joining me. It was a ton of fun. You can find this write-up, a link to this stream, in the next issue of Astrolabe. You can see the URL right there, aiden.substack.com. In my fancy new Twitch overlay, which I made this morning. It's not just a black screen. So I can't wait to join you all again. Thanks for coming, and I hope you all have a super awesome day. All right, bye.